So here we're going to solve a quadratic equation using the square root property. The first thing we want to do is we're going to identify what's being squared, and that's the entire set of parentheses. So before I can actually get rid of that square, I've got to isolate that set of parentheses. And I've got to be very careful as I do to make sure I'm not screwing anything up in the process. So the very first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take this 16 and I'm going to move it to the other side. Now, since the 16 is negative, that means it's being subtracted. So to undo that subtraction, we are going to add 16. And those will go away. So that is going to leave me with x minus 9 squared equals 16. Now here's where you have to be very careful to make sure things don't get screwed up. If you end up getting something squared equals a negative number, that's when you're going to have problems because I can't square anything and make it equal to a negative. So that's where your no solutions come in or your imaginary numbers come in. But here we have it equal to a positive number, so life is good. We're going to now get rid of that square. Now the opposite of a square is a square root. So if I take a square root, those will go away. And what I do to one side, I have to do to the other. Now the trick with the square root, you have to remember it always comes with a plus or minus. When you make a square root appear, you have to put that plus or minus. So it's going to leave us with x minus 9 equals plus or minus the square root of 16. You can check in your calculator, make sure that should be 4. Okay. So since that square root worked out nice and pretty, it is a whole number instead of another radical left over. We're going to take this and break it into two equations. We're going to break it into one for the positive, so that'd be x minus 9 equals 4, because we're doing the positive. And we're going to break it into one for the negative. So that would be x minus 9 equals negative 4, so that's the one for the negative. Okay, so here we are going to solve for x. I'm going to add 9. Please work these separately. Otherwise, our brains tend to think that they're going to come out to the exact same thing. 4 plus 9 is 13. Okay. That gets that one solved. There's answer number 1. For answer number 2, we're going to add 9. It's going to give us x equals 5 for our second answer. Okay. So anytime you have something squared, as long as you don't have another variable outside of what is being squared, you're going to isolate what's being squared, isolate the parentheses, move everything else to the other side, remove the square by taking the square root, don't forget the plus or minus sign, and then if it comes out to a number without a square root, break it into two equations. If it left the square root, then you could have just added 9 and said 9 plus or minus the square root. But since the square root simplified away, we had to get two separate answers. We had to finish the problem.